I'm here. I'm always here. I'm everywhere. Hello.
How are you?
Nee, toen was het in 1975, 57 toen mijn mama. Drie mensen kijken aan. Ja.
Als je iemand daarop zit.
Nou.
Dat was eigenlijk
Thank you for coming here. It's been overwhelming. I can't believe how many people have come for the exhibition of both launch of both exhibitions. My name is Carmel Aiello and I'm the Coordinator and Education Officer for Fairfield City Museum and Gallery. I'd like to welcome you here today. Very warm welcome on behalf of the Council as well. And at this point I would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land that we meet today, the Cabral people from the Darug Nation. I'd like to acknowledge their elders, both past and present, and I'd also like to acknowledge and welcome any Indigenous people who are here with us today as well. This is the first exhibition opening for 2013. It's been a wonderful way to welcome the new year. And I would also like to welcome Councillor George Barsha, who will be representing the Mayor, Frank Carboni. The fact that both projects are predominantly women's projects. I mean, I'm sure there are some men that might have worked on echoes from the past. And they both deal with the experiences of living in Australia and coming from a different community or from a different nation. I'll start first with echoes from the past. The Dutch migration to Australia has been here before World War I, but probably it wasn't until after World War II that the majority of the Dutch people migrated to Australia. In actual fact, they were the second biggest group after the Italians to migrate to Australia. They probably are not as noticeable, probably as some of the other European nations, maybe because of the way they look. They look very English in some ways, the blue eyes, blonde hair, fair features. It's quite a stark difference to some of the Europeans that came from Greece and from places like Malta and Italy. Myself being a child of migrant parents, I understand how important it was for people who came from overseas to find other people who had a similar experience too, because they weren't. And not being successful there, decided to come back to the southern half of the world, and a lot of them settled in Australia, in particular northern Queensland. And my parents, who come from Italy, have also migrated into northern Queensland. So there's sort of a commonality of experiences from the former Dutch East Indies. A lot of the migrants did return back to the Netherlands, but nevertheless they are represented here in Australia. Currently about 2.6% of people born overseas have come from the Netherlands who are living here in Australia. And some of the stories in my family as well. I mean, the nostalgia of what you left behind, and also the beautiful memories of childhood as well, which is seen in the marionettes, the beautifully superb, intricate marionettes. Unfortunately, we couldn't put them all up, but there was more of them. And also the shadow boxes. We have a beautiful quilt up there, exclusively made of the map of Holland. And I was talking to Frances before, and she was telling me what's the difference between Holland, the Netherlands, and Dutch, because now I've been educated between what they are.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the exhibition on this typically Dutch day in Sydney. Clouds and rain. I pay my respects to the traditional owners of this land as well, locally known as the Gadigal people. When we arrived here as migrants, we were not aware of the ownership problems of this continent. But since the Mabo ruling, Eddie Mabo, as you remember, we realized that the continent was in fact occupied long before even that the Dutch mapped much of our coast in the 17th century. They were here for 60,000 years. Now Fairfield is a place where the Dutch migrants live, more in the past than now, and also celebrate the famous annual Holland festivals in the 70s, 80s, and I think still early in the 90s, are still talked about with enthusiasm and even fondness. There is also a Dutch dance group that has performed here, although they seem to be operating more in Parramatta and in Blacktown now. And of course there is Holland House, the Dutch-Australian shop, furniture store and warehouse in Smithfield, not far away from here. I'm with the Dutch-Australian Cultural Centre at the back of the furniture store. A lot of people still don't know that we're there, so we stand outside the door sometimes spruiking and say, here it is, do come inside. And it's amazing, every time that we're there, we find that there are lots of people who've never been there. And they say, fantastic. You should see the visitors book, what they say about it. I'll come back to this in a moment. Frances Larder, the project manager. She recruited volunteers by talking about the concept of the project and the importance of doing this exhibition. The objective is to leave behind a lasting impression and legacy for future generations. She visited most of the Dutch clubs in New South Wales, including the Sydney Dance Group. She started off with about 30 volunteers. Some of them heard about the project by word of mouth, many actually. There were no handouts or flyers. And she also went to Wollongong, Darcy and the Newcastle club Concordia to find recruits. And she visited specifically the Netherlands and did relevant research there. Understandably, towards the end of the project, some people had become tired, and she ended up with about half that number. It was a marathon, really, a labor of love. Some of them were called upon just for their expertise that was needed for a particular part of the exhibition. Like, for instance, a carpenter. That particular carpenter is here today. He did an excellent job, made the shadow boxes. They themselves, who were the other people interested, quite a few second-generation Dutch Australians with grandchildren, whom they felt had to be made aware of their roots. Also, they themselves wanted to know more about where they came from, and many came here as children of migrants. Several of the volunteers are actually Australians, who've never been in the Netherlands. They are either married to a Dutch husband, or they are interested in the Dutch culture and history for its own sake. The group started meeting once a month at the Casula Powerhouse Museum near Liverpool for the first couple of years, and they then had to move. Our DACC premises in Smithfield, at the back of the Dutch shop there, was definitely too small. Mrs. Larder conducted the workshops at her own house in Epping,